So if anybody's ever had braces, if your gums and teeth aren't hurting, your teeth aren't moving. If anybody's ever worked out, if the next day you're not sore, you didn't work out at all. You might as well have just eaten apple pie and hung out. It's the same concept with finances, where you need to save enough so it forces you to change your habits. Because if you don't change your habits or get into this zone of saving and investing and thinking about opportunity cost, if you spend this, you can't invest in that. What's going to happen, I think, for many people is that after 10 years, you're going to wonder where all your money went.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Emily, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Plenty. My husband and I co-founded Plenty after we began merging finances and were shocked to find what a mess that could be. We've both been in Silicon Valley working in fintech for over a decade each, so we settled to build something better. Today, Plenty is a wealth platform helping modern couples invest and plan for their future together. We bring the investment strategies and products of the wealthy to the everyday household. But we know in relationship, it's not just about the products and tools, it's also about the conversations. And talking about love and money is still unfortunately very new. So that's what we settled to do in our podcast to hopefully make it a little bit easier for everybody listening. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Sam from Financial Samurai. Sam is the man behind Financial Samurai, which he started in 2009, driven by the goal of helping individuals achieve financial independence sooner rather than later. Today, Financial Samurai is one of the largest independently run personal finance sites, attracting over 1 million visitors every single month. For 13 years before that, Sam served as an executive director in international equities at Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse. He holds a BA from William & Mary and an MBA from UC Berkeley. In 2012, he left finance to embrace a lifestyle centered around travel, writing, and fatherhood. Sam is also a best-selling author of How to Engineer Your Layoff and Buy This, Not That. In his free time, he enjoys playing tennis, pickleball, and poker. We're very excited to welcome him to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Emily.
So Sam, I'm so curious. Growing up, did you always think you would end up working in and around finance?
I think I did. My parents, they took me along to this party one time in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And it was interesting because we had a really ratty 1976 Nissan Datsun with no paint, no hubcaps. And my father's business acquaintance or associate sent over this Mercedes-Benz 280 SEL with really fluffy seats and brought me, just me, to this house party after school in a home in the hills. And I was like, wow, what does this guy do? And it turns out he was a beverage producer, a Yo's beverage drink producer in Malaysia. And I was like, wow, I think I want to be rich and I want to be an entrepreneur. So that's when the bug started, where I recognized what having wealth can do. But at the same time, I also saw the dichotomy between the rich and the poor in Malaysia, because there was a lot of poor people. So that kind of scared me actually into trying to study hard and do well in school so I could one day hopefully achieve financial freedom. And so in high school, I remember on the breakfast table nook one day, my dad showed me some ticker symbols at the back of the paper. And I said, Dad, what's this? And he said, oh, these are ticker symbols. They go up and down. And that's when it whetted my appetite, like, oh, maybe I could do something in the world of finance.
Do you remember how old you were at the time?
Yeah, I was probably 15 years old, sophomore year in high school, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I liked sports. I remember seeing rich friends in big houses, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. And so when I went to the William & Mary, the College of William & Mary, I decided to study economics and Mandarin. And that's when I opened up a trading account with Ameritrade. It was back in 1996. And I started day trading in college, made some money, lost a lot of money. And it just really was really exciting. I'd have CNBC on at the Spanish House junior year in between classes, and I would just stay glued to the TV.
Mm-hmm. So what led you to Wall Street from there? Who was the first person who opened your door? Why did you go to Wall Street? How did you decide that?
Well, like I said, I was just kind of hooked on trading stocks online in college. And so I just thought, well, if I can do this as a career, I think that'd be really amazing. And so I sent my resume off to this career fair in Washington, D.C., and luckily it was chosen. And there's this woman by the name of Kim Perkis who grilled me like a sausage, and just asked me all these questions about the Fed and my outlook for rates and the stock market. And apparently I did good enough to get invited to the Super Day at Goldman Sachs at One York Plaza. I was at Old Slip Road, I remember. And it was like 10 interviews just all day. And I thought to myself, oh, I think I got it. And lo and behold, actually I didn't get it. I had to do another, I think it was like 6 more rounds of interviews, 55 interviews total. Wow. Yeah. Like I flew back, did all that. And it was, I mean, after like the 35th interview, I was like, this is kind of ridiculous, but oh well, they're flying me up to New York. I got a place to stay. I get to see my sister who was there. Why not? Let's just roll with it. So when I graduated from William & Mary, technically I didn't have a job. This was June 1999. And so I went to go visit my girlfriend in Japan, who's now my wife. But then I got an email. Like it was like July. It said, oh, congrats, you got the job. I was like, whoa, phew. I know what I'm going to be doing starting in August 1999. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. Like the rush, the energy to be on the trading floor at One York Plaza on the 49th and 50th floor. It was very exciting. And yeah, that's the beginning of my career.
So you mentioned your wife. How did you and your wife meet?
We met in college. I was a senior looking for a job and not taking too many classes. I took golf, like advanced golf and like advanced economics. And I was trying to get an easy A, so I took a Japanese 101 class. And that was the first class I ever got a D in my quiz. But that's where I met my wife. So I was like, oh, okay. That was like trade-off. So I dropped that class, but then I continued the relationship.
So you worked on Wall Street during the dot-com era and spent 13 years working in financial markets. What was that like during that chapter?
Oh, it was a blast. From 1999 to 2000, mid 2000, it was a blast because it was the first dot-com bubble. People were making money left and right. Stocks were going up like Yahoo, 10% a day. It was crazy. B2B stocks, Commerce One, all these random stocks. But then the crash happened in 2000. I think it was March 2020. That was the top. And it became a dead market for the next 10 years. And then there was obviously the global financial crisis in 2008 and 2009. And that was a really scary time. And that really marked the beginning of no more fun times working in finance. Because that was a time when a lot of people lost their jobs, lost money, and a lot of restrictions were placed where you couldn't really entertain your clients or take them out as easily as you could have in the past. I still remember, it was pretty funny. I still remember this compliance call we all had. And there's this woman, it was very important, like sent email to all saying, you got to get on this compliance call. And I thought I was maybe in trouble. And what happened was, she said, I just want to remind everyone that the limit you can spend per client for an outing is $200 per person. And I was saying to myself, really? It's $200 a person? I thought the limo was only $100 a person for this entire 10-year career. And I was like, whoo, phew. I was like, okay, $200 a person. So, okay, the good times are not that far away. It's still okay. But that was really the time where, Wall Street people, anybody who worked on Wall Street were bad people, and we lost our money. And it really made me soul search on what else to do after Wall Street.
So you must have some stories, though, of some of the boom times. Like, what were some of the highs during the boom times that you remember?
Well, I mean, my most fun was going to the Hong Kong Rugby Sevens Asian Investment Conference almost every year for 11 years. And those were really good times. We were entertaining clients. We were meeting with companies going public out of China, India, especially. And it was just so much wealth being built and so much excitement. It was just like new frontier, the Asian markets, because I worked specifically in the Asian equities markets. And so I got to go to travel a lot and speak to smart people and just speak to entrepreneurs. And that, again, was kind of the rekindling of the entrepreneurship bug, where these people would create something from nothing. And then we were meeting them at their final stage of their journey when they want to raise capital from the public markets through an IPO. And so it was just really fascinating to talk to these entrepreneurs and just to get to know them on a personal basis.
Thinking about, you've seen so many different chapters of both boom and bust. In that bust era, what were some of the lows that you remember too?
Oh, the lows clearly are friends and colleagues getting laid off. I remember at Credit Suisse, it was probably like 2009, probably 7 rounds of layoffs.
Wow.
And after that, it was probably 2 or 3 rounds of layoffs every single year. And so, one of my good friends got laid off at Lehman Brothers. I remember he had $15,000 worth of expenses that he hadn't got reimbursed for. And because Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, he didn't get reimbursed at all. So not only did he lose that, he lost the value of his stock compensation, and then he ultimately lost his job. So that was tough. That was, he just had a child. So it's really the layoffs that hurt the most. Boom bust, like super boom bust working in finance.
Were the layoffs potentially some of the reasons why you decided to ultimately leave finance?
Well, there's several reasons. One, I didn't find it fun anymore after doing the same thing for 12, 13 years. It kind of gets boring. I was with Credit Suisse for 11 years and Goldman Sachs for 2 years. So I think anybody who can stay at one firm for 11 years is that's got to be top 1 percentile in today's employee job market. So I was getting bored. We were the bad guys, even though I had nothing to do with the housing crisis working in Asian equities. And I discovered my joy of writing on Financial Samurai, which I started in 2009. I started in 2009, July, as a way of making sense of the chaos. It was very therapeutic writing and just getting to know other people who were going through something similar. It just felt really comfortable. And so I continued to write, before going to work or after I came home, and it just kept on growing to the point where I was like, oh, maybe I can do something new after working in finance for 13 years. And it was a moment in Santorini, Greece. It was October 2011. And my wife and I, we were hiking up the mountain. We didn't take the donkey. No, we did take the donkey up the stairs. Yeah, we didn't climb the stairs. And we were walking around for a couple hours. And then I finally found this bar. It was overlooking the crater. It was 78-degree day. It was so beautiful. And it had Wi-Fi, which back then was rare, 2011. And I had my phone, and I got an email from a person in London who said, hey, I'd love to advertise on Financial Samurai. And I was like, oh, really? Oh, I'm in Santorini, Greece. I'm actually closer to you right now than I was when I was in San Francisco. And he said, cool. Can you put up this link on Financial Samurai? And I'll pay you $1,100. I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I got my phone, I put up the link, and then within 30 minutes, he PayPal'd me $1,100. And I was like, wow, there could be a life after finance. So that really got my hopes and thoughts going, because it's generally a good idea to retire to something or just to transition to something just instead of to nothing, right? And so that was when I got the wheels started turning. I was like, okay, maybe I can figure out a way to exit by negotiating.
Funny you talk about the story of deciding that this was going to be something you want to do moving forward, because Story for Plenty actually also started in Greece, although it started in Naxos, actually right next to Santorini. And so, Sam, where did the name Financial Samurai come from?
Oh, I was just sitting on my bed one day going on GoDaddy, and I typed in a bunch of URLs to see if they were taken or not. And it turns out a lot of things were taken back in 2009, except for Financial Samurai. And given I grew up in Kobe, Japan for a couple of years, my wife is half Japanese, and I really enjoyed the culture and the system and the idea of honor and justice. I thought Financial Samurai was a perfect name.
Do you remember what that conversation was like with your wife when you started that conversation of, I think it's time to leave my job in finance and focus on building Financial Samurai?
Um, I don't know the exact moment except for the moment in Santorini, Greece. She knew that I wasn't happy doing the same thing over and over again. Originally, I had planned to work until age 40 and then get out. But when I came up with the idea of negotiating a severance package, that was when I thought, okay, it's now or never at 34 years old. She saw me suffer in terms of stress. I had TMJ, which was like tightness of the jaw, grinding the teeth. I had sciatica, lower back pain. And so she knew I wasn't happy and I was kind of miserable. And so she was really encouraging. And so the idea of negotiating a severance package was huge. That was the biggest catalyst because it enabled me to keep my deferred stock and cash compensation, as well as get a severance payment for my 11 years working there and be eligible for unemployment benefits because I was technically laid off. And so it was an amazing thing where I was able to speak to my boss and say, hey, if I can train my subordinate, provide for a smooth transition, and save you money by not paying me because my subordinate was junior, do you mind laying me off with a severance package? And it was just a very straightforward question. And then he thought about it for about a month and he said, yes, we'll work it out with you. And so this is the second rule of FIRE, which I talked about in a post. And that is, if you want to retire early, never quit your job, get laid off instead to try to get a severance package. There's no downside.
Yeah. And, one of the other things that you write about as well is how you did spend this chapter of your life optimizing for career progression and ultimately waiting until you felt like you were ready to have kids. If you could go back in time and talk to your 30-year-old self, what would you have told yourself?
Yeah, I would have told myself to focus on family planning sooner because nobody ever told me how amazing kids are. Nobody ever told me about, well, if you have kids, your parents, your grandparents might want to be with them at some point and spend time with them. But if you have kids too late, your grandparents might not be around. Or maybe you might not be around if, by the time they're adults, you don't know. So nobody really knocked it into me saying, well, you should try to find someone. Like, I hear all these stories about parents who pressure their children to have children. And that wasn't my parents, zero pressure at all, zero conversations about family planning or nothing. And I would tell my 30-year-old self, you want to have kids sooner rather than later because your kids will be the most precious things you will have in your entire life. So you want to be with them for as long as possible.
So you waited until you were ready. You're finally ready. What was your experience of entering that next chapter of becoming a parent?
Yeah. So at 34, I left my job, stable income, healthcare benefits, everything. But my wife still worked. She's 3 years younger than me. So we made a pact that said, if I was able to survive being jobless essentially for 3 years, you too could become jobless too in 3 years if you negotiate a severance package. Because we had passive income of about $80,000 a year at the time in 2012. So that's enough to live myself or with my wife without children. And the thing is with children, it's at 34, I still wasn't fully confident in the move that I made. Because how many people will leave a well-paying job at 34 when you're just kind of getting started and making a lot of money, right? And so children weren't on my mind at age 34. And at 35, maybe started becoming more apparent that it's kind of now or never because my wife was 32 at the time. But then we tried for a couple of years and it didn't work out. So ultimately, we had children when our first son, when she was 37, and I was 39 years old, 2 months before my 40th birthday. And so we felt very blessed. But in retrospect, I wish we had children 5 years sooner.
So going back actually to something you said, by 34, you had built up, passive income of 80,000. How did you do that? That's quite an accomplishment at that age.
Well, thank you. I did it because I was desperate after the first month working on Wall Street to find a way out. That's the irony of having a really difficult, stressful job. The more terrible it is, the more you will try to find a way out. You're not going to make excuses. You're going to find a way. And so my way was to be super frugal. I lived in a studio apartment with my friend for the first 2 years. I saved every other paycheck. So that meant saving 50% of my after-tax income. And then I tried to save and invest about 90% of my year-end bonus if I got one. And I did the math right then and there. I said, well, if I save, let's say 50% for 10 years, then I'll have 10 years of living expenses, right? Because I only live off 50% of my income. And so if I saved 70% for 10 years, I would be able to save about 14 years. And so I ended up working for 13 years, averaging about a 70% savings rate, which meant that I was able to save over 22 years or something of living expenses at the age of 34. So 34 plus 22 is 56. But then I had passive income because I reinvested it in rental properties, dividend-paying stocks, CDs. And then I also had a wife who was working for 3 years until she left in 2015. And so it was very strategic. It was very math-oriented and very strategic, driven by my desire for freedom as soon as possible.
Did you ever feel like that level of saving ever prevented you and your wife from, quote, living fully?
Yeah, I think so. Like if anybody's ever lived in New York City, Manhattan, you walk out the door, it's almost like you lose $50 to $100 instantly. So a lot of, I would say, sacrifices had to have been made because, I couldn't go out to the dinners or bars as often as my friends. But the thing is, I was just starting my career. So I was a cost center and I needed to learn as much as possible and work hard, like harder than I could or compared to other people. So I could actually keep my job and get paid and promoted, right? I think there's just endless amount of things to do when you're working in finance in New York City. Like literally you can work 100 hours a week forever. So that kept me from spending money, but once I developed that frugal habit for 2 years in New York City, I brought that with me to San Francisco. And I just kind of kept like that, living like a college student for as long as possible. I lived in a 1-bedroom with my wife in a really average apartment. And so I just kept that going. And as most of us who normally work longer, we get paid more. So long as you can keep that expenditure, your spending fixed, you're going to do well and be able to save more and more over time.
People always ask, what's a good amount for saving and investing? And a number that I was thrown out a lot is that framework of the 50, 30, 20, where you spend 50% on necessities, 30% on the wants, and then the last remaining 20% on your whatever you're putting aside for saving and investing. If someone came to you and was like, hey, this is exactly what I'm doing, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, if the amount of money you're saving and investing doesn't hurt, you're not saving enough. So if anybody's ever had braces, if your gums and teeth aren't hurting, your teeth aren't moving. If anybody's ever worked out, if the next day you're not sore, you didn't work out at all. You might as well have just eaten apple pie and hung out. So it's the same concept with finances, where you need to save enough so it forces you to change your habits. Because if you don't change your habits or get into this zone of saving and investing and thinking about opportunity cost, if you spend this, you can't invest in that. What's going to happen, I think, for many people is that after 10 years, you're going to wonder where all your money went. So that's why I think a product like Plenty is very helpful for couples, because it forces the couple to focus on their cash flow and on their investing. It forces couples to have a conversation about their money. And the more you can stay on top of your money, the more you can measure it and the more you can optimize it.
So what was it like then for you and Sydney to then navigate that conversation? Did Sydney also have the same philosophy and approach to life? Did you actually start in different places and then came together? Or were you actually, living in a very similar way?
We were living in a very similar way. Her favorite store of all time is Target, not Gucci, not Prada, nothing like that, right? It was Target. Can we go to Target maybe once every 6 months and buy something cool? Her wedding dress was from Target. It was $80 and it was very simple. And we had a very frugal wedding on the beach. I think it was like $3,000 all in, including our round trip plane tickets to Hawaii, including the ceremony, and included our favorite yakiniku camellia Korean barbecue place for 16 people.
Wow.
So we've been really frugal. She grew up in a lower income household, single parent. And so money was not plentiful for her. And then my parents were federal government employees, middle class employees. So they were super frugal. I mean, again, 1976 Datsun with no paint, no hubcaps. And I still remember my dad admonishing me for ordering a drink at a restaurant when he said, "You can just drink water with a free slice of lemon." And so that's how we've been approaching money and spending money for our entire lives almost.
Did your approach change with kids?
What happened with kids is, again, what nobody told me, and I wish someone told me this, is that if you have kids, I think the majority of people will naturally try to better themselves. They'll quit their bad habits. They'll try to work out. They'll try to eat better, and they'll try to work harder and make more money. And at the same time, they'll feel conflicted because the more they work, the less time they're going to get to spend with their kids. And so this is kind of a big problem. But in terms of spending on kids, it's really easy to spend money on kids. Like, it's very hard to spend money on myself. Like, I have this jacket that I've worn for 3 years, and I just spent $28 going to the dry cleaners to fix the zipper instead of buying a new one for $105. So even now at 46 years old, with the passive income we have, I have this frugal mindset. But when it comes to kids, it's like you want the best for your kids. You want the best education, the best toys, the safest crib, the funny shaker to make them go to sleep that costs like $3,000. And it can get kind of nuts. And so the thing is, schools, especially colleges, they know that. They know that the propensity to spend on kids is quite inelastic, which is why the price of tuition just keeps on going up, even though the value of college education keeps on going down because you can learn everything online for free. And so parents really need to watch out for how much they spend on kids. And so do we. Like, we have to be very careful not to spoil our children. And one of the ways we're approaching that is by actively working and demonstrating good work ethic. So last summer, I told my son, look, come with daddy. We're going to go landscape the front yard of a rental property. So I made him work with me for 8 days, and we hauled the dirt out. We got the mulch. We moved the rocks. And then he was so tired, he was just like sprawled on the lawn. And I think these are the moments that he'll hopefully remember forever, because I remember these moments as a child. And it's important to demonstrate action instead of just saying something.
And remind me, how old is he again?
He is 6.5. He's almost 7. So after age 5, it's possible to get him to do some work.
That is incredible. A 6-year-old helping you with a landscaping project. That's an inspirational story and one that I'm definitely taking notes for. But, it's never easy because especially in this day and age, the marketing messaging is just so good. You don't want to get a safe crib for your kid? Oh, you don't want to automatically rock your child to sleep in wave-like motions? But how do you and Sydney then approach some of these decisions for what to spend on? And what not to spend on, especially when it's for your kids and not for yourselves?
Yeah, so safety, spending money on safety is number one. You can't skimp out on safety, right? So, for example, a car. We had a Honda Fit. which is awesome for San Francisco parking. You could park in literally 25% more spots because those spots between the driveways suddenly all fit for the fit. But after that, after we had a child, actually 4 months before we had our son, we said, nah, I don't think the Honda Fit is going to work because the doors are so thin and there's no crumple zone in the back. And so we bought, unfortunately or fortunately, a larger car, an SUV. And so we didn't skimp out on the car because you can be the safest driver in the world, but someone can still hit you and cause an accident. So safety stuff, we just don't, we try to spend as much as possible for health and safety. But I don't know, we don't have a specific formula for saving money on our children. And maybe we should. Maybe that's why Plenty will be so helpful, because of the goals that users can establish on Plenty's platform. So such as college or car or house or private school education. It's a real challenge. It's hard to spend money on us, but it's easy to spend money on our children. So we always have to balance, if we're going to spend something on our children, will it benefit them health-wise, education-wise, and enrich their lives? And will it not hurt our future retirement income as bad? You have to do that calculation.
So how do you find that balance? Because of course there's, the day-to-day expenses. There's, the organic food, organic blueberries, which seem to be shockingly increasing in price every time I go into a grocery store. There are, also the near-term things like paying for a better daycare, potentially thinking about private school even as early as elementary school. Then there's also the bigger things like college and your own retirements. How do you find the balance in all of that? Or how do you think about the allocation for where your dollars go?
Well, I think it's important to have purpose in why you're working and making money and saving and investing. So I like to tether specifically various investments or passive income targets for specific things. For example, I have calculated, unfortunately, this sounds crazy, but worst case scenario in 16 years, right? What is that? That's a long time now. 16 years, the cost of 4 years of private university is going to cost $750,000. And I use worst case scenario because I'm trying to be conservative. So I don't believe maybe my kids will have the smarts to get a scholarship. They won't have the practicality to go to public school or become a citizen of Canada and pay local tuition and only, it was like $5,000 instead. I don't anticipate that. So I anticipate worst case scenario. And then I kind of work backwards. I come up with that pro forma or that target amount that I need. And then I work backwards to save and invest to hopefully get there. And in general, it's worked. It's worked very well. So for example, when I was 22, 23, I calculated I needed $3 million to comfortably retire. And then I worked backwards. So you figure out the number, work backwards because you have the years to save and invest. And it's very easy now with tools like Plenty or calculators out there to figure out how to get there.
That was definitely one of the things too for us is that, both Channing and I love our spreadsheets and we realize, and we know most people don't. So that's also one of the things that we try to make simpler with our product. One thing I'm also curious about is you lived in New York and now you live in San Francisco, two cities that are famous for being outrageously expensive relative to the rest of the country. How did you make the decision to stay in a high cost of living city?
Yeah, well, New York was out of necessity because that's where my job offer was. San Francisco was also out of necessity because that's where my second job offer was. And then after 11 years at Credit Suisse in San Francisco, it's almost like inertia where it's hard to leave because once you've been anywhere for any amount of time, you grow roots, you own property, you make friends, you have your network out there, and it's really hard to leave. I was really considering moving back to Hawaii in 2014. Love Hawaii, lifestyle, culture. I'm even less stressed in Hawaii. But the funny thing was, although housing was about 30% cheaper, the income opportunities were way fewer. We're talking, I would think, like 90% fewer income opportunities. And if you got a job, the pay was like 50 to 70% lower. So in a funny way, even though housing costs in San Francisco are high, it's because the wealth creation opportunities, the job opportunities, the income are high. You have so many ways to make money in the Bay Area. And if you didn't, then the cost of living wouldn't be as high. It has to be long-term rational economically. And so I love the Bay Area. I love San Francisco because the weather is decent all year round. I still remember it was raining on a Friday, which meant it was snowing in Lake Tahoe. And so I went out for a day trip to Lake Tahoe, 2.5-foot powder on Saturday. And I came back on a Sunday and it was 76 degrees and sunny. And I played tennis with my shirt off in the park. It was awesome. And so that was kind of a lifestyle moment for me where I said, wow, the lifestyle here is great, but so are the income opportunities. And now with big tech and artificial intelligence, you see a lot of folks moving back to San Francisco from Miami or whatever. I just think it's just a wonderful and exciting place to be.
Do you think it's home for good?
I think it's home for the next 8 to 10 years until my son and daughter finish middle school, the 8th grade. And after that, we have to apply to high school. So that's the moment where we can either continue in San Francisco or maybe we can finally apply to high school in Hawaii. And I think that would be really great because it's beautiful there. If I go to public school, it's free. And if I go to the private school, it's about 30% cheaper. And I'm also going to be older, right? So I think it's important to live in areas at different stages in your life. You don't have to, but I think it's like you match your aura to the environment. If you're hungry, you want to build your wealth, New York City, San Francisco, maybe Los Angeles are the places to be. If you are 50 plus and you want to enjoy your wealth, feel less stressed and not be around of so many go-getters, then Hawaii or San Diego might be the perfect place to be.
Fast forward, because I'm sure you and Sydney have spoken about this. You're in your 80s, you're far retired, kids are doing well. Where are you?
I hope I'm in Hawaii. Hawaii is seriously the best. Like I would say in general, I'm like a 5 to 6 out of 10 in terms of stress. My white hairs went away. I started growing white hairs at 34 because I was so stressed. All my chronic pain went away after I left finance. And so in general, I'm not that stressed. But when I step off the plane in Hawaii, I'm like at a 2 or 3 out of 10. And I totally believe that stress is the silent killer that expedites your mortality or your death, however you say it. And people don't really know it, like too much stress, right? I worked for 13 years and I didn't really realize what feeling no pain felt like because I had just been used to all that chronic pain and stress for so long. And it was only about 6 months after I left, I was like, wow, so this is what living pain-free is like. And so I totally see, because, when you're older, time becomes more valuable because you have less of it. So you really appreciate more the healthier lifestyle as you get older. And so Hawaii, I definitely think is it. Living in the Northeast as a golden years person, I don't think that's strategically the best. I think you can live longer in a warmer climate.
Warmer climates for longevity. I love that. Sam, thank you so much for making time to be on the show today. To wrap up our show, I have a few lightning round questions if you're game for that.
Sure.
First one, as the person who wrote Buy This, Not That, what's something you bought recently that you were really excited you bought?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't recent, but buying a hot tub is hands down, no-brainer, awesome purchase that I didn't need, but that is awesome. The hot tub costs about $15,000. And during the pandemic, it was my sanctuary where I went 3 times a week. I also brought my kids. We had great bonding time for about an hour on average. I've sat in the hot tub for 2 hours thinking about posts to write or responding to emails, looking at the ocean view. It's that was the best $15,000 I ever spent.
Is there something you bought recently that you thought was actually a waste of money?
I tried to think hard about this, and the answer is no. I am very intentional with my spending, where like if this doesn't bring me joy, I'm not buying it because I don't want any clutter. I mean, I bought this retractable rake for $20 and because I wanted to like rake the leaves and ease and then retract it and put it in my car. And I haven't used it as much as I thought I would, but maybe that's one regret. But really, it's only like $25. Who cares?
Is there a bucket list experience that you and Sydney are excited for?
Yeah, we've traveled to over 60 countries and I lived abroad for 13 years. So we traveled like crazy before our first child was born in 2017. So we were traveled out for about 6 years. But now it's almost 7 years and the travel bug is coming back. And our daughter is 4 years old. And they say kids don't remember much of anything before 5. And so they want to appreciate the travel. So I'm excited maybe to go see the pyramids of Egypt or go to Jordan and see those items in 1 or 2 years when our kids can remember it. And hopefully things are safe because that's definitely a bucket list.
Thank you so much for answering everything and for sharing so much of your life and your experiences with everybody listening today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, and I'll chat with you later.